Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So we're going to get started. We know some folks are going to be coming in and trickling in a little bit. We've heard that there's some folks that are a little bit delayed. Also, just folks that are dealing with some flu issues. So we're glad they're at home, and hopefully we'll catch up with them later. So we'll get started, and think tonight's a celebration. We are celebrating a really important milestone for the Buck, which is our transition and movement into doing clinical trials. And it's a special, special night. And, in some ways, it's been 25 years in the making, right? This actually is our 25th anniversary. And for the first 25 years, we have been heads down, scientists at the bench, doing foundational research in the biology of aging. And it has been amazing to see what has been discovered and what has been learned, but that has really been what we've been focusing on. And it also is an important date, 25th anniversary for the Buck, but it's the 50th anniversary of Beryl's passing, Beryl Buck. And that was sort of the start of all of this. And so we are the very lucky beneficiaries of her estate gift 50 years ago. And so it's pretty amazing. I think she would have been absolutely blown away if she had known what has come of it. And what that initial vision of helping people across the world to age better, this was something that was not really understood at the time. The initial thinking was, at the time when Beryl passed, and then the 10 plus years that kind of rolled out after she passed, and thinking, what are we going to do with this wonderful gift? Part of the conversation was, the world is aging. The population of the world is aging, and we don't know anything about aging. We don't understand how it works. And in fact, some of the basic discoveries of it happened right here at the Buck. And a couple of those that I think are worth mentioning, I'll just share right now. One is this discovery and kind of realization that aging is plastic. It's malleable. We can actually manipulate it and change it. That was a big milestone to think about and to really kind of get your minds around. The second was that aging is the number one risk factor, and in essence, the root cause for many of the chronic diseases we experience as we get older, from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's to cancer, diabetes, and the list goes on. So aging is driving our risk of all of these diseases. And so then the logical next step is, can we intervene? Can we do something about it? And that is what we've been spending our first 25 years on, trying to understand and map the fundamental mechanisms and biology of aging so that we can understand when can you intervene and how can you help people age better and live healthier longer and fulfill the mission of the Buck, which is to live better longer. It's not so much how many years we're living. We want those years to be as healthy as possible. And so that's our focus on health span. And so for those first 25 years, our focus has been on model systems from worms and flies and mice to understand how does the biology work, to identify what some of these pathways and mechanisms are, and understand where we can intervene. And so this year marks a major transition for the Buck, moving into human clinical trials, taking what we've discovered and what we've learned and answering the question, does it help humans? Will it help us age better? We know we can help mice live a lot longer. That's the good news. We can do really good by worms, but can we help humans? And so this is the pathway and the trajectory we're on now, and it's super exciting. I think last week was the 65th birthday party of the town of Novato, and we hosted it here at the Buck. I don't know, it's called Paint the Town Red. I don't know if people have heard that. And they were here, and I had the chance to talk to the mayor of Novato, Tim O'Connor. Never met him before, lovely guy. And it was fascinating to see, we forget how special this is here within Marin County and in Novato. And Tim was looking at me and he said, think about it. We have the brightest, greatest minds in aging biology and the field of aging research coming from 35 different countries to work and live here in Novato at the Buck. It's an amazing thing that what we have here is ground zero for research on aging. It's mind-boggling. And we were talking about that, and then one of the council members said, the promise of this, and he said, he's an admitted Trekkie, he said, the promise, imagine Dr. McCoy with a tricorder, one of those little gadgets where he could scan and understand what's wrong. What do we need to do? How can we intervene? And he said, I think we're getting close to that. Do you agree? And I think what you're going to hear tonight is that we are on that path. I don't know if we'll have a tricorder. Brianna and John, you'll have to tell me if we're going to, in a year or two, have a tricorder. But I do think it's an amazing time we're living in. What will happen in the next 3 to 5 years will be groundbreaking. We will hear about drugs being discovered. We'll hear about drugs being released. We'll hear about new research that no one had ever seen before. You're going to hear about some of the things we're doing here at the Buck to take technology, artificial intelligence, and large language models, and begin applying that to our own research and accelerating what we're discovering in ways we never imagined were possible. And all of this is going to lead to amazing breakthroughs and discoveries, we think, in a very short order. It's an incredible time. Captain Kirk said space was the final frontier. I'm not sure I agree with him. I think biology is the final frontier. And I think that's the journey we're on. We are very blessed. So as VP of Philanthropy, I never introduced myself. I'm Brian Van Weel, VP of Philanthropy. As the VP of Philanthropy, I know firsthand how blessed we are to have the community behind us, to have you behind us, to have donors from all over the world who believe in what we're doing and supporting our work. It really takes a team. We have a beautiful campus, as you know, and we are blessed to have some of the world-leading scientists here, but we are constantly looking for money to do our science. That is the nature of the beast. We're a nonprofit research institute, and we need everyone's help and support to get there, and we have been so lucky to have your help and support along the way. We also know that many of you in the room are going to be part of this journey in a special way, joining our clinical trials, being part of our discovery. And we really want to thank you for that, and that's something we're also celebrating tonight as well. It is, I think it'll be a groundbreaking time for everybody. And how many people have registered to be in the clinical trials? Yeah. You're going to be poked and prodded. You're going to drink stuff that you might not ordinarily drink. But we're going to advance our science, and it's an amazing thing. So I am going to introduce two of our explorers, if biology really is the next frontier and the final frontier, who are boldly going to take us where no one has ever been before, right? This is what we're really excited about. So it is my amazing pleasure to introduce two of our leaders here at the Buck who are going to be speaking tonight about our clinical research unit, the work we're doing, the clinical trials. You're going to hear about some amazing new trials that are just getting rolled out now. And you're also going to get a chance to ask questions and interact with these two very, very special people. So it is my honor to introduce to the stage Dr. John Newman and Dr. Brianna Stubbs.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you all of you for coming to join us for what I've been looking forward to for a while, our second celebration of clinical research at the Buck. I'm John Newman. I'm a geriatrician and a Buck faculty member. I started my lab here in 2018, and along with Dr. Stubbs, co-started our clinical research program here at the Buck, which we're going to chat with you guys about tonight.
Yeah, so I'm coming up to my 6th year anniversary here at the Buck. I was brought on as lead translational scientist, responsible for helping the smart Buck scientists make products out of their work. And then once we successfully made 2 products out of ideas that initially had been kind of come out of John and Eric's research, John and I teamed up and started to use those products in our clinical research. So it looks like I'm going to take a seat over here.
We decided we'd be informal. We'll have kind of a chat. We'll have a fireside chat without a fireplace, and we want to share our excitement and share your excitement with how clinical research has started and grown here at Buck. We want to talk a little bit about what are we doing, what are we trying to accomplish, what's the big picture, and I think it's really exciting and important. And then we want to, all of you who have participated in our studies, especially, we want to show you what we're doing, what we've talked about, what we found so far, and where it's leading next.
So we thought we'd start by kind of setting the scene a little bit. Dr. Newman here, he's a physician, treats people when they're sick in the hospital. He's a basic scientist. He pokes and prods mice and makes them do all kinds of cognitive tests and whatnot. But could you start by explaining a little bit for everyone here why you decided to kind of combine those 2 things? You know, why did you decide to make people your lab rats and run clinical studies?
Well, I got introduced to aging biology in grad school by accident. I wasn't studying aging biology. I was doing some good old-fashioned biochemistry about RNA and how genes are pressed into chromosomes. But it happened to introduce me to a gene, a protein that was related to a premature aging disease, a genetic premature aging disease that some kids can very rarely get. And the idea that, well, wait, aging is something that you can control with a gene just blew my mind. And everyone in this field has an experience like that. That was the coolest biology I'd ever heard of. And I decided then that I wanted to do aging biology for my science, for my career, and decided to pair that with geriatrics once I started my clinical training and realized how fun and challenging it was to help figure out how to keep people doing the things they love as they age.
Can you say a bit more about fun and challenging with regards to older adults?
Well, so fun because I enjoy that people have lived full lives, and it's really fun to meet people who have had experiences I'll never have. We'll talk a little bit later about how your experiences shape your aging and how there's biology under that, and we're going to figure out what that biology is. I'm not representing the VA, but I do most of my clinical work at the VA. I love meeting World War II veterans, Korean War veterans who have just done incredible things in their lives. I also love the dignity and complexity of growing older, of having to do my favorite patient would always tell me every time he came into my clinic in a wheelchair, he would always tell me, "Doc, I'm doing the best I can with what I got." And I loved helping him to do the best he could with what he got. And that complexity of figuring out what's the right medicine to take or not take, what's the right thing to do or not do, what kind of exercise, what sort of things to do in your life, what's exactly the right button to try to push to keep someone functional. I love that challenge clinically, and I love that complexity in biology too. And aging biology is the way to cut through that complexity of all the stuff that goes on with our health as we get older and figure out, well, like the Buck logo said, how to live better longer.
I kind of feel like running clinical research studies with older adults is very similar. It's so fun. We've had the same wonderful interactions with everyone who comes in. To me, it's almost I mean, I've never been a practicing physician, but I feel like it's such a less pressurized interaction than you'd have with a physician. People who come and participate in the research, they really want to be there, and everyone has an interesting personal reason for being there, and they're there out of the generosity of their hearts, so we really appreciate that. So certainly resonate with a lot of that idea of it being very fun to carry out clinical research studies with older adults, but then also challenging, as a, young, fit, very functional person myself, understanding, how we can make accommodations for people to make it easy for them to participate. Even simple things like having large language consents and things like that has been something that has been a transition for me in my clinical research. And I know the next bit that we wanted to talk about was kind of how this even happened at the Buck. So I joined the Buck. My PhD was as clinical research in athletes, very much like myself. I was in a research study. I saw the ad. I thought it looked like a good way to make a little bit of money. And it was doing tests on the rowing machine, which I was doing every week anyway. So that was my first ever experience of clinical research. And many of you have participated, and it's kind of, you don't know what you're going to get. You turn up. And I was also doing a ketone drink study like some of you here have done. So I had to drink something that was kind of funky looking. But transition from being a participant into running the studies, and it's a whole different ballgame running studies with younger athletes than it is with older adults. So that was my expertise, although I would say that a theme that was consistent between working with young adults and older adults is resilience. With those athletes, we're trying to look at how we can get at those extra percentage, how we can help people function in an extremely stressful environment. But a lot of those stresses, for example, inflammation and oxidative stress, those are things that are problems for athletes, and those are things that are problems in aging and that we're trying to treat. So there are kind of common themes that I was able to build on a little. But then when I arrived here at the Buck, you were here and you had a clinical experience, but there was no one else here who was even thinking about doing clinical research, and was here for a number of years. And I remember we had several conversations with the leadership at the Buck, and people were scared. I mean, it's a whole boatload of liability. It takes a load of skills and infrastructure to kind of be able to run clinical research effectively. And initially there was just a pause, a cautionary, is this the right thing to be doing? But as Brian sort of said at the outset, and I think the two of us are really seeing now, using humans as a model system is just where the whole field is moving towards, and the complementary nature between the worms, the flies, the mice, and then also bridging the gap into people as well. So in the last few years, we really saw that sea change. And that was catalyzed with the BIKE study funded by Dr. Jim Johnson, who I know is here somewhere. So it really took Jim coming along and believing in us, the leadership seeing that this was where the whole field was moving towards using humans as a model system, and then having the two of us, your physician background, my experience in clinical research, and I guess like our combined energies, because it wouldn't have been enough just to have one of our energies. John has a very busy clinical schedule and all of that, so it really took the two of us to both commit to it, right place, right time, resources, to really make this happen. So that's kind of a nice transition into thanking. Again, you're going to hear a few thank yous this evening, but it's, as Brian said, it's really taken a village. Thank you to the Buck leadership who finally caved into our incessant requests to run clinical research. Brian and his team for always supporting us and linking us up with Jim Johnson. Bill and Mary Poland, whose name you'll see above our new clinical space out in the atrium. So we've actually been in there nearly a year at this point, but Bill and Mary, right from the outset of the Buck's founding, knew that they wanted clinical research to be an important part of the Institute, and it's really wonderful to see it now front and center down here. Everyone who's in the Impact Circle, again, funded our research, that very first study, and has the Impact Circle has also funded another one or two of the studies that we'll talk about today. And we will also hear a little bit more from Brian at the end about Andy and Sarah Barnes, who have continued to support our growth physically as we take on even more research in the next year or so, and you'll hear more about that later. And last but not least, everyone who's participated, and I know John wanted to take this bit.
So what is so fun and exciting about doing clinical research is that we're not doing it alone. It's not our research, it's your research. You are scientists. All of you who raised your hand to say that you've been in one of our studies, or you're enrolled and or looking at being a part of one of our studies, there's a reason why we don't use the word research subject. You are research participants. You are actively participating in helping make the science happen. You are essential. We literally can't do it without you. But it's even more than that. So starting this program at the Buck, I mean, it's a big deal to start a brand new clinical research project. I mean, we figured out how complicated that is, right?
We've recently been on a few phone calls with other people who are contemplating doing the same thing, and they all look at what we've created here and
think
kind
we're
of shook.
crazy,
Yeah.
and are a little awestruck, which I'm happy to see.
Yeah.
But one of the great things about that, though, is because we started from scratch, we could build the program that we wanted to build. And to me, it's really important because aging affects all of us, because we are a part of the community in which we work. I wanted to build a program that would really be part of the community in which we're doing science, that the community is part of it. So you guys being participants and helping us do the science is part of that. Us sharing with you in events like this what you're helping to achieve is part of that. And there's more we want to do too. Like, we're just getting started. We have lots of ideas.
More ideas than we have time to do all of the ideas.
I love the idea that we are of Novato, we are of Marin and Sonoma, we are of the Bay Area, and we're doing work that's helping the entire world. And you guys are an essential part. You are partners in that work. So thank you, every one of you.
So I feel like we'll start with the bike study. That's the study that Dr. Johnson funded. We finished it about a year ago. It was running for about a year. It took us a little bit of time from when Jim first sat down with us and made the gift to us actually being able to run the study, because we had to build all of that infrastructure and start to train and hire a team and all of that. So it was a little bit of a lag getting going. But once we got going, we ran this study in the year. The bike study had nothing to do with bikes. We did have a few people call up or email us and ask if they had to cycle in the study. And I guess, I didn't think too hard when we've got better acronyms for our studies now. But the bike study stood for the Buck Institute Ketone Ester Study.
I came up with
You
that.
came up with that
blame
one?
me,
Okay.
but it was in part, Brianna managed to escape telling you about her history as a world championship athlete. But at the time that we were starting Bike, she was doing Ironman triathlons and doing a lot of competitive riding.
I think that might have been why bike as a study name resonated with me at the time, but it did definitely confuse our research participants. So yeah, sadly no time for triathlon anymore because I'm too busy running all of these studies. I now run ultramarathons, which is marginally less time consuming. Yeah, I ran 240 miles along the length of Wales this summer over 6 days, and I've just about recovered the use of my feet. But if anyone wants to talk about that later, I can regale you with stories of bogs and sheep and rain and all of those things. But back to the science. So no bikes in the bike study.
So why Bike? What was Bike about?
Well, so Jim came to us, as I mentioned when I started here at the Buck. We were developing ketone ester drinks along with an industry partner, and Jim had been buying these drinks. Felt great. I don't want to be overselling how you felt, but you felt like they were doing something for you, and you wanted to see whether that was based in scientific fact, and if we could run a study to kind of sort of tease at that and prove that. And so we got together and we discussed, and what we said to Jim was really, these ketone drinks have never been studied in aging before. I had done, my PhD was in ketone drinks and athletes, lots and lots of studies of young, fit, healthy people, but no studies in older adults. And also, not worryingly, just a product of how products are developed. The longest study of a ketone drink up until that point was just 4 weeks. And that's quite a short time for really giving something to someone to look and see if an aging relevant endpoint changes. If we're ultimately interested in seeing if we can change someone's strength or speed or balance, something that would be relevant to an older adult, it's going to take longer than just a month to really get to that point. So we felt like in order to ultimately answer Jim's question, we first needed to lay some foundational groundwork, zoom back a few steps, and run a study that was kind of in fitting with our capabilities here, which were kind of nascent, and also, deliver some foundational research to show that ketone drinks were safe for older adults who are obviously a little bit more complicated than young athletes. And then also, if it was possible to take ketone drinks for weeks and weeks at a time. 4 weeks is kind of all well and good, but can people really stay on this kind of regime for a long time, long enough for them to see a functional difference?
And to test the biology too. So this was the perfect example of a translational gap. And this is, in the big picture, this is one of the reasons that we exist here at Buck. Because my lab still does a lot of basic science stuff with ketone bodies. We edit genes in mice, we feed mice these compounds, we do all kinds of fun biology, and we make mice stronger and think faster. There's a lot of stuff in the world of aging research where there's really exciting basic science data like that. But the translational gap is, how do you know if the biology works the same in people? How do you take that first step to turning that into something that will improve people's health? Well, you got to see, is the biology the same? You got to test that. So in this case, the way to test that is to have some people take ketone bodies and see if the biology works the same way that it does in the laboratory. And we want to do this in a really rigorous, step-by-step process. So step one, can we do big experiments? Is it safe? Is it tolerable? Can we see signals of whether the biology is changing? And if we build that step well enough, then we can take 3 more steps up that staircase, and we'll tell you how we're doing that now.
So you can see on the screen here, the BIKE study is already leading to a lot of scientific publications. Obviously that's a cornerstone of good science, getting the results out there and sharing it with the community so that other people can build on the work. So we have one study published on the safety data. It all looked good. Ketone drinks are very as safe in young people as they are in old people. We didn't see anything worrisome there. We also started looking at if older people metabolize and break down ketone drinks different to young people. And again, we did see some signal that there might be some differences in age. And actually, we have another study following up that kind of further supports that conclusion. We have papers looking at our functional outcomes, so our leg strength, our walk speed, all of those things. And then we're working on big, complicated papers that look at immune function, other biomarkers, especially things like cellular senescence. And then we had a collaborator. Those of you in the audience, if you know, we looked at some gut microbiome as well. So there was a lot of mail-in poop around to UCSF. But to really, kind of cement what John was just saying, I had spent a lot of time, and what convinced me to move from researching athletes into researching aging was there was all of this preclinical animal and cell-based literature around ketones affecting core processes of physiology and aging, like inflammation. That's a classic example. Loads and loads of animal work looking at ketones and inflammation. And, really trying to make that step into people was critical because it's all very well and good seeing if things change in mice, but we've got to translate that. And so one key result from BIKE, which really nicely translates preclinical data, was some results from the BIKE study which looked at a process of cellular senescence. Senescence, you can feel free to take over at any point, but I'll give it a go. Senescence, the late Judy Campisi was really well known in the field, Buck investigator, one of our founding investigators, do people say Judy discovered senescence? I guess, she was one of the founding mothers
She created the concept of senescence, yeah.
So, it's a very important concept to all of us here at the Buck, but to simplify it so that we can all understand it for the purposes of today's discussion, senescent cells are like zombie cells. So their cells are still alive, but they're releasing a load of bad stuff that's kind of sending nasty signals to all of the cell around it. It's associated with inflammation. It's associated with declining function and disease, and senescence increases with age as well. So it's the process of these creating these nasty zombie cells. Some preclinical data from, I can't remember where this research group was, but another research group using an animal model saw that in blood vessels, that ketones could reduce senescence in blood vessels. And we saw that and it was very interesting. So when we collected the samples from the bike study, we looked at cellular senescence. And you can see on the right our panel of results looking at things that go up and down that relate to senescence in our study population.
And we know you can't read the small names on the side, but there were two really fun things that we found. So that's a map essentially of dozens of proteins in the blood that are released by senescent cells, and we measured hundreds of proteins in everyone's blood who took part in bike. The red stuff up there, that's a few people who were in bike who started off with a lot of these senescence-related proteins in their blood. By random, and we don't really know yet what that means for someone's health. That's why we're doing science like this. But there were a few people who had a lot of these proteins. If they were taking the ketone ester, those went down. So the red turned to blue. So it was a really interesting hint, and we're going to see if that holds up in a bigger study, that if you have a lot of senescence going on in your body, that taking the ketone ester may help to dampen, to improve that senescence. And linking it back to the mice, so what are some of these proteins that went up or down with the ketone ester? And one of them at the top of the list was that protein that's involved in this mouse study in preventing senescence in blood vessel cells. So we really found a nice link between the human biology and the mouse biology, that's why we're doing this.
It's so funny because so much of science, it just takes so long. Like publishing a paper, we have papers in review for 6 months. Like everything feels like, I run up a lot of mountains. It's like science is more painful than an ultramarathon for sure. It's like, every step you're kind of feels like there's resistance and and I remember, but there's moments of like elation and joy, and when you feel like you're the first person in the world to see something that means something. And I had one of those moments during my PhD, but seeing that hit that was from the preclinical animal paper with ketones and seeing it pop up on our list here, it was like, my like eureka moment almost. So, you get irrationally excited and you get these moments of sort of small wins that are important to celebrate. And it's wildly exciting to be the first person in the world to see something and to sort of discover something. So, there's a lot of work that goes into getting those sort of big eureka moments, because it's all step by step, and that's a really nice sort of segue into the follow-up from Bike, which is the Takeoff study. We'll demystify all of the acronyms for you. John came up with this one, or did ChatGPT come up?
No, this was all me.
This was
no
you.
AI,
okay, this is a good one
me.
from John. It's targeting aging with a ketone ester for function and frailty. But it's also quite good, we're ready for Takeoff. It works in a lot of different ways too. So the Takeoff study is building on Bike. So why don't you tell us how the results from Bike affected the different, the ways that we've changed the study design for Takeoff and what Takeoff is looking at?
Yeah, the data and the information from Bike, which some of you participated in, told us that one, we could do a bigger study successfully, and also how to do it. So Takeoff is going to answer is meant to answer the important questions of, will this actually improve function? So it's right in the title there. If people who are slowing down, older adults who are slowing down, take a ketone ester for about half a year, about 6 months, will they speed up? Will they be stronger? Will their gait improve? Will they be able to walk faster, have more endurance? Will their cognitive speed up? We're going to measure all these functional tests, and Takeoff is designed to detect changes in those real functional measures. So is it actually having effect on people's lives? And because we're doing this at the Buck and we want to know the science that's driving those changes, Takeoff is going to incorporate even more biology than Bike. How does it affect senescence and changes in the immune system? How does it affect metabolism? And poop. There's going to be lots of poop in Takeoff too. And Takeoff is a national collaboration, so it's funded by the National Institutes of Health. The NIH is really important for funding research and getting it over the finish line to changing people's lives. Please support the NIH.
Especially right now.
Especially right now. And we're doing it with partners around the country at Ohio State and at the University of Connecticut Center on Aging. So there'll be lots of different people from different areas of the country, and we can see if this really works to change people's lives and the science that drives that.
So Takeoff, we have our first participant next week. We're all feverishly preparing. We're getting study product getting shipped in from all over the country. It's definitely not quite fire drill like right now, but really getting ready to go. So I know that some of you might be interested in participating. And every study that we have up here, we obviously have a really fantastic team working behind the scenes to make this happen. So Esther is your point of contact if you want to find out more about the Takeoff study during the reception.
And Takeoff is fueled by bike. So because of bike, we made Takeoff longer. So people take it for, we felt comfortable doing that because people could do bike. Well, they can do a little bit more. So Takeoff is longer, and Takeoff will have a higher dose. If the dose we gave at bike was safe and people were able to do that, we're going to give people even more and really try to get the biggest change out of Takeoff. And that's because of bike. Bike is making Takeoff possible and much more likely to succeed. And hopefully show differences in people's lives.
And I think something else important to say is that without bike and the preliminary data, both in terms of outcomes and feasibility, we'd have been very unlikely to get that NIH funding. So, the seed funding from Jim and from donations ultimately resulted in a successful, large, multi-center NIH grant. So, thank you again. It really does make a difference.
And I'll add that this is based at Buck. So the city of Novato is hosting Buck, which is leading the prime site for this big national collaboration. That's a big deal. These multi-center studies generally are based out of big universities in a relatively small number of centers, but this is right in our backyard.
And there's more. So we have a bit of a theme of ketone drink studies, partly because of John and I both having an interest in ketone metabolism for a while and work to bring these products to market. So one study that we're running is the STACK study, and STACK stands for Strategies to Augment Ketosis. This study is another collaboration with our friends over at Ohio State. And it's really aiming to answer that question that I kind of alluded to earlier, which is, does how old you are affect how your body metabolizes these ketone drinks? And maybe does your health affect it too? Because at the moment, I would just give John or I would both have the same drink. Someone who was 90 would have the same drink as all of us. It's not in any way personalized. And we think that personalization is going to be the key to unlocking success in terms of long-term translation. And so the STACK study is recruiting people from the age of 20 through to the age of 70 and giving them a ketone drink and measuring how their body breaks down that drink. And one of the things we measure is on the screen here, which is area under the curve, AUC. It's kind of a measure of how much ketones got into the blood after the ketone drink. And so what we're already seeing is that older people either seem to break down ketones slower, or there's something going on that means that the older that you get, the higher the BHB AUC that you have. And so this will, how we would translate that is perhaps an older person would need less ketone drinks than a younger person. So this is really important. It's a very big study. This study has 400 people split between the Buck and Ohio State, and we've been enrolling and testing people for this study now for around about a year, maybe a little bit longer. We've done about 100 people here. Ohio has done about 100 people, but we've still got 200 people that we need to find. So, we're looking specifically now for people who might have metabolic dysfunction and diabetes, because that's something else that we've seen in the literature might affect how the body metabolizes these ketone drinks. So, if you know anyone who wants to participate in that kind of study, definitely come see Esther again.
And that's it for ketones now, right?
That is it for ketones.
So we got started based on ketone biology because that's what my lab was doing, basic science. But there's so much more that we want to do, and we have so much more to tell you about because there's so much that started in the last year. So what is GRACE, and how is GRACE bridging that translational gap?
So some of you in the Impact Circle might have seen a presentation by Dr. Pankaj Kapahi, who's another faculty member here at Buck. His lab focuses on metabolism and glycation stress. And glycation stress is when sugar gets stuck to things that it shouldn't be stuck to, and it causes problems with function. And so very, very translationally, Dr. Kapahi had found in his mouse model that glycation stress could be alleviated by a special combination of things that were available over the counter as supplements. Things like piperine, which is black pepper. What else is in there? I should know this off the top of my head. There's 5 five special secret ingredients in his supplement that he had treated his mice with, and that had reduced their glycation stress and improved a bunch of health outcomes in the mice. Which, as you said, it's all very well being able to make mice healthier, right? We have a lot of controls. But because all of the things in this supplement were available now to buy over the counter, and Dr. Kapai, he has a company that makes and sells the supplement, we were able, with the help of the Impact Circle, to design a study to make that step across the chasm from mice to people and really see if we could replicate his findings. And so the GRACE study, GRACE stands for Glycation Reduction and Aging, a Clinical Evaluation. And so the aim of that study is really just to replicate what we saw in the mice. We're going to be looking at postmenopausal women because there's a particular buildup of glycation stress, changes in hormones that had been alleviated by glycation-lowering strategies in mice. So we think that this population might be particularly responsive to this kind of intervention. It's very similar in design to bike. So we're just looking for 30 people. People have to be a little bit overweight, have a slightly higher BMI, and also be postmenopausal. But what we're looking to see is, first and foremost, do we see that reduction in glycation stress? But then we have a bunch of, exactly like in bike, a bunch of exploratory outcomes that we're interested in and we think could provide data for another funding application or a bigger study. So we're very interested in levels of hormones like FSH, which is a female reproductive hormone, as well as body weight, body composition, insulin sensitivity, and glucose management as well. So really another great example, we kind of took the template that had worked very well with bike and applying it to this other supplement that targets glycation stress, really collecting a lot of biospecimens and looking for that signal in aging biology, just like we did in bike. And for the two of us, the first collaboration that we're doing with another faculty member here at Buck, and really trying to make our expertise as clinical trialists available to other faculty here in a way that takes their science from bench to bedside.
Exactly.
So GRACE study was kind of our first collaboration, and now we have other collaborations with other folks all around the USA, and one of those John's going to talk about now that's collaborating on looking at social determinants of health.
So those examples we gave you already of some of the studies that we're doing are examples of testing interventions, using an intervention, giving something to somebody to tweak their biology and then measure how that changes and how that changes their health. But we still need a better understanding of the kind of fundamentals of how and why we age. And we want to get at that too here at Buck, and in people, not just in mice. So many of you probably know that the way that we live our lives has a huge impact on how we age. If you try to quantify what are the things that go into deciding whether you're going to get a chronic disease, whether you're going to wind up in the hospital, when you're going to die, a lot of that is determined by social factors and by health behaviors, things like how you exercise, whether you smoke, the kind of food you eat, but also the neighborhood you live in, the education that you got, your wealth. These are called social drivers of health. And if you add it up, that's about 70% of going into how your health is going to change as you age. You'd think that access to health care would be most of that, but it's actually a smaller piece, which I'm a little embarrassed to see as a doctor. How you live and where you live is actually much more important than the stuff we do as doctors. But it all drives aging, right? So it's all got to be driving biology. Is it the same biology that we're studying and trying to intervene on? That's the question we want to answer. If you're talking about exercise, for example, how does that actually change the way you age? And pin that, because a lot more on that in just a moment. But those social factors, a lot of you probably know that if you look kind of town by town or city by city or neighborhood by neighborhood, places that are wealthier live longer and are healthier as they age. There's a lot of reasons behind that. But one of the reasons is biology, because the way we live changes our biology. Take the flip side of that. What's the worst combination of social factors you can imagine? Well, for me, it's people experiencing homelessness. And we know that people experiencing homelessness age fast. You can measure that. You can measure their geriatric syndromes. You can measure their chronic diseases. They mostly die of chronic diseases of aging, not of drug overdoses.
But in their 50s or 60s.
But in their 50s, yeah. 20 or 30 years younger than the rest of us. So I want to what can we learn from that biology that then can help all of us to live healthier longer? So of course we can't do that ourselves, but we've partnered with some amazing collaborators in Los Angeles who study and follow and collaborate with people who are experiencing homelessness and are able to do science with their participation in their community. And they're really interested in learning how people experiencing homelessness age. And so we're working together on a project to both measure how they age, but also to start to study the biology. Judy Campese's cellular senescence. Do they get more senescent cells faster? Is it other mechanisms that drive their health problems? What are the most important mechanisms that drive their accelerated aging? If we can figure that out, we can help all of us, because we all have imperfect backgrounds one way or the other. We can help all of us live longer. But the flip side of that is, well, what's the best possible exercise is king, right?
So I'm biased. There's a full disclaimer here that I'm biased. I think that exercise is very good for you. That's declaring that up front. So when we're thinking about assembling observational cohorts that are as different as possible, we've got our cohort of people experiencing homelessness. We're also recruiting a cohort of super elite older athletes in the MOVE study, which is a great acronym, which I can't take credit for. It stands for Molecular Optimization via Exercise. I think that was a ChatGPT. And so we all know that exercise is good for us. We all know that if you exercise, you tend to live longer and have better function when you're aging. But you might have to pick yourself up off the floor like I did. Nobody has ever studied aging biology in elite athletes. Don't know why. You look at any study of aging in active people, and it's people who exercise an hour a week, which is very different to the people that we have in this cohort. People have done exercise physiology studies. They've looked at muscle fiber type and muscle mass and heart volumes, and all of those things look great in our older athletes, but nobody has ever studied aging biology. So our hypothesis and what we expect to see is, because these people have better function and tend to live longer, is that they are going to have really good-looking aging biology, less of that cellular senescence, less of that inflammation, better mitochondrial function, things like that. And so the MOVE study, I'm perfectly prepared to be proven wrong, and we do have a few naysayers. In every audience, there's people who think that actually athletes might be doing too much, and so I'll concede that this is a possibility.
That's science, right?
Yeah, that's
we'll
a science.
Out.
I'm happy to be wrong, and I will change my habits if maybe. No, I take it back. I consider changing my habits if we find out that lots of exercise is bad for you, although I might already be a little bit late for that. We'll see. But we're recruiting people who are kind of like me, but in 30 years' time. We're meeting the most interesting people. We've got Team USA, multiple Western States 100-mile race runners, cycling world champions. It's really very inspiring to meet these people.
Where do you meet these folks?
Well, okay, so the first person that I recruited for this study, who sadly texted me, she can't be here. I was up training for my ultra marathon. I had all my running vest on, and I'm kind of looking a little bedraggled, and I'm on the top of Mount Tam. I think that day was my last training run, and I was doing 3 Tam summits, 6,000 feet of climbing, so I'm definitely a little bit worse for wear. And I get up there, and I'm filling my water bottle up at the fountain that there is up there, and these 2 older ladies roll in on their bikes. I'm like, I see you. So I would go over there, and I got a little bit nervous because I didn't want to just go and be like, hey, you old. But I think I did it a little bit more tactfully than that. But it turned out that, yes, they were, I was like, not that I think you're over the age of 65, but they were up there on their bikes. So that was our very first study participant, someone who I'd met at the top of Mount Tam on a weekend run. But a lot of other people, I'm on an elite women's running team in San Francisco called the Impalas. We've had 7 or 8 people through there, multiple national champions, world record holders. It's very inspiring for me. And then also I went to a group called the Tamalpa Runners, and they're just so generous with their time, very welcoming. So we're very athlete heavy right now, but as part of this study, and maybe this might not be you, but you might know some people, we're looking for people who are healthy but kind of allergic to exercise. Maybe you walk around, maybe you do some yoga, but you're not getting your heart rate up or sweating or breathing heavily for more than an an hour a week. So that's going to be our control group to go alongside our athletes.
And if that describes you, remember, you can have your own hypothesis for what we might find. So you might hypothesize that being allergic to exercise is better.
I think it's a very real possibility.
So we'll find out.
That could be the case. But if you need more, if you would maybe fall into that bucket, and you need a bit more incentive. What our ultimate goal is to do is to take all of the samples that we get from this study and figure out how to put some of those benefits into a pill. Can we figure out what are the hallmarks of aging that are most turned up or turned down by exercise, and can we, target those with small molecules and drug them? So we have, and again, this is another really, I'm so excited that we're collaborating with many other Buck faculty on this study. It's been really, just a wonderful side effect. We have a very close partnership with Simon Melov's lab. Simon, he's a muscle and aging expert. He has whale muscle. He has all kinds of interesting muscle up in his freezer. He has a picture of his own muscle up on his wall, where he came and helped us practice the procedure for the muscle sampling that we do in this study, and he had his SLR camera and was taking pictures of the muscle as it came out of his leg. So Simon loves a bit of muscle, and I'll show you what Simon does as well, but in a second on the next slide. But we also collaborate with Akosh Garensla. Is that right how you say it? Cool. I just call him Akosh. He does all of our mitochondrial function, and the magic is, everyone, is that it comes out of our research participant here in the lab, and then it goes up 2 flights of stairs or along one corridor, and you can do so much more with samples that are fresh. So it's really supercharged the research in these other labs at the Buck, being able to get hold of these really high quality, fresh samples that come from studies like this.
Yeah, I mean, why do this stuff at Buck, right? This is why it's so important to do this stuff at Buck, because I think there's no place else that has a clinical research group that can take muscle samples.
From older adults.
From older adults. So close, literally steps away from a lab that does, world-class, cutting-edge biology, and we have some fun pictures to show you.
So what Simon can do, if you decided to be in this study, what happens is very nice doctor over here gives you some nice numbing medication. We use a tiny little needle. Yeah, very small. That's sarcastic, by the way. It's a large needle, very large. Yeah. There's some people here who've come under the needle a few times, myself included. And yeah, we don't want to be signing people up for things we wouldn't do ourselves. But it comes out of the leg, it goes on up a few flights of stairs, as John said, and then, I wonder if I can get it to go again. Let's see. No, okay. There we go. So it goes on a little plate like you can see on the top, and then it grows on a special scaffold, and then we apply an electrical current. I'm going to go back and forward again so you can see it. There we go. And we can apply this electrical current so that the muscle contracts in a dish. And you can see on the right the force readings from that muscle. So we can grow your muscle in a dish and measure how it functions in a dish. We can then do a whole boatload of cool stuff. So we can take a sample and see what the muscle is releasing. We can apply drugs and see how the drugs change the function of real human muscle from our athletes or from our controls in a dish. Anything else you want to say to make it sound any more cool?
That sounds pretty cool to me.
Okay, it sounds pretty cool to me too. I don't know whether my muscle made it into the dish, but I did get a nice picture of my muscle that I donated. And I do have the record for the biggest muscle biopsy sample so far. So that's, maybe only I'm proud of that. Okay. And also it was a bit of an interesting moment for John and I's relationship, because John was the one doing the muscle biopsy on me. And so I think he was very concerned about not hurting me.
Those legs, you do a lot with those legs.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I need my legs. Very true. Very true.
Yeah, you were a trooper, though.
Okay, so now moving on to kind of big, exciting programs, again, have an impact across the whole Buck. So we have 2 studies that were recently funded by a federal agency called ARPA-H, which is the government's Moonshot for Health agency, giving a lot of very big awards. This award is worth up to $52 million to the Buck. And as part of that, the aim of the whole program is to develop personalized strategies to predict health and healthy aging. And so we're running a few studies under that program here at the Buck. We would not have got that $52 million award if we did not have the capability to do clinical research. So it's really transformative that we can do this at the Buck. And these two studies, both studies that we'll tell you about, have 150 people. So they're a lot bigger than the other studies that we've done, a lot more involved, and also starting to kind of cross-pollinate between other faculty members like Nathan Price, who's an expert in bioinformatics and AI and digital health, and also James Yurkovich, who also works on biorhythms. You look like you wanted to say something, but I can continue if you like.
Well, this is another example of, we're not giving someone an intervention, it's an observational study, but with a different purpose. This is even more directly related to trying to change clinical practice than the MOVE study even, which is more about understanding basic biology of aging. But time really needs to bridge this gap between all of the high technology things that we can do, all the literally tens, hundreds of thousands of things that we can measure in your blood today with all the fancy equipment around Buck. But how to use all that information to actually understand your health. And it's hard to do that right now, in part because if you just measure everything all at once, you get a bunch of numbers, but how do you know if it's going up or going down? How do you know if it's higher in the morning or higher at night, right? How do you know if it's higher when you exercise and lower when you sleep? So if you just get that one number, we don't know what to do with that. But what we need is a really, really rich, deep data set of how hundreds of thousands of things change over the course of a day, change from day to day in a week, change from week to week, how they're affected by exercise. And then we can actually know how to interpret all these high technology things that we are capable of doing and use them to really inform people's health.
So TIME stands for Temporal Investigation of Multimodal Elements. And if you're in this study, you're going to be a time traveler. So it's, we're just trying to make it sound really cool so you'd like to participate. But anyone who is in this study is going to be, our VP of Business Development likes to say, the most deeply characterized human beings on the planet. So we will be measuring blood, we will be measuring poop again, we will be measuring oral microbiome, and for the ladies, microbiome from somewhere else too. We will be measuring changes in the back of your retina, we will be measuring changes in cognitive performance and in mood. You'll be wearing several wearables. You'll be a bit like a bionic human wearing an Oura ring and a Whoop band and a continuous glucose monitor. We're going to be having all of these very deep continuous data streams, and this is where John and I and my new colleague Alison, we're trying to nail down the clinical logistics, and then we give all of this data to our very smart friends with the computers, and they help us make sense of it. And our partner on this is James Yurkovich, who's a research assistant professor here. His goal is to make this data set the Rosetta Stone, so really foundational for anyone else who's using these very advanced techniques to know, okay, I collected this sample from this person at noon, how should I correct for the fact that it wasn't collected at 8 in the morning, say, and really trying to tie these data sets together in a way that's going to unlock research for multiple people across the globe. So TIME is very big, very ambitious. It's accompanied by a study called BETA, which is not an acronym, I believe, but the study is aiming to look at beta cell function, and beta cells live in the pancreas. And the idea of the BETA study is to see whether we can predict how your diabetes will progress without having to bring you into the clinic. Can we use wearables like a continuous glucose monitor or like Oura rings and Whoop bands? Can we learn things from those non-invasive continuous measures about how your pancreas is actually doing in terms of health? And I think, it's kind of intuitive that this will work because you get so many more data points when you use continuous glucose monitors as an example. So we thought that this was a very good idea, and it turns out that some other researchers also did. So someone has done a very similar proof of concept that kind of lays some foundations that we're now slightly tweaking our research plan to accommodate. people here might have heard of Mike Snyder. He's a professor down at Stanford and very, very well known in this space. So it's actually given us a lot of confidence that we'll be able to build on his work and ultimately build a non-invasive model for the progression of both type 1 and type 2 diabetes and the progression from pre-diabetes into full-blown diabetes. And obviously, metabolic health is at an all-time low here in the USA. It's a worryingly large proportion of the population that have pre-diabetes and diabetes. So this, also the incidence of diabetes, it does increase with age as well. So this is very relevant to the US population, both with the poor metabolic health and aging as well. So this study will involve people coming here to Buck, having the clinical gold standard for pancreatic function test, which is called an oral glucose tolerance test. You drink up a big load of sugar, we measure your blood sugar response for 2 or 3 hours, and then we will compare that to what we see when people are wearing the wearables at home. So, this actually, I think is the first, because we're doing takeoff as pre-frailty, but this is our only real disease study where we're going to be actually having people who have a medically diagnosed condition. Yeah. So I think this is an important milestone for us, because actually recruiting people, who have a medical diagnosis, and other, I can't remember what our next slide is, but another really important milestone that we have in mind is not only bringing in people with certain common and low risk, I guess, diseases, but also starting to understand how we can repurpose drugs and actually do drug studies here. We think we're a ways off from being a first in human site, coming here and giving you something that has never been in a person before. But in the aging space at large, there's an awful lot of interest about taking drugs that are already approved and have good data and repurposing them for aging. Maybe you want to say a bit more about that with this slide.
Yeah, so our team has grown fast. This slide is almost full. And 2 years ago, it started with
me and 2 others.
Yeah, 4 of us.
Yeah.
And it's just emblematic of how quickly the need and the capabilities of geroscience-focused, biology-grounded clinical research has grown here at Buck. And it also represents our commitment to being a part of the entire community in which we exist. We recently were able to hire a recruitment specialist who's going to help with our outreach to community organizations. So we absolutely love, so we could not have gotten this started as fast as we could without you guys specifically, the community of people who are interested in the Buck, who have come to visit the Buck, who are part of our Buck family. But we do want to bring the rest of our community in too. So our recruitment specialist is going to help us to reach other areas in Marin and Sonoma. Brianna and I will be taking this trip on the road and talking to lots of people. We have a multicultural and multilingual research group. Takeoff is going to be enrolling in Spanish language for people who are more comfortable and more fluent speaking in Spanish. We want to be able to reach as much of the older adult community in Marin and Sonoma as we can. And we have other doctors now, which is dear to my heart too. We have 2 part-time physicians who are helping with some of the stuff, especially related to our exercise studies that it's good to have a physician around for. So it's really quite the program that we've grown here.
Yeah. Whenever John and I meet, occasionally we find time when we go out for dinner and we sort of sit and we're like, oh, that got out of hand pretty fast. I think that not only for me as being in California, not where I thought I would be, if you'd asked me when I was 18, which is getting longer ago, but I wouldn't have thought I'd be on the other side of the world. If you told me that I'd be researching aging, I'd have probably been pretty surprised about that too. But even 7 years ago, just before I joined the Buck, if you had said that we would have this huge program with this growing team and this, huge study pipeline, very successfully, funded by different agencies, I think I'd have had to pinch myself a few times. It continues to be a wild ride every single day, but it's just so rewarding to see, sort of look back and, I guess, I should say, this guy's amazing. He put a lot of trust in me. I'm young, not faculty here, and, without John's trust, none of this would have been possible. So, thank you as well.
But equally, none of this would have happened without Dr. Stubbs, who's been the person actually getting the work done and the vision behind building the organization. So, true partnership.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Team science. Science takes a team, and you guys are part of that team. We couldn't do without you either.
So yeah, big thank you. to all of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for spending your evening with us. We're obviously going to be out in reception. A lot of our team are going to be out there at the reception. I think people have name badges on, and go find them, talk to them about what we're doing. We hope we get a chance to speak with all of you. But thank you from the bottom of our hearts for everything that you've done to make this possible. We are at a period of very, very rapid growth. And we're very, very excited to be kind of like clinging to continue Brian's metaphor, I guess, clinging to the outside of a rocket ship as it kind of hits light speed. Warp speed, sorry. John had to translate and give me a Doctor Who metaphor for the sonic screwdriver to translate earlier. So I'm doing my best here, Brian. But I'll hand back over to Brian to kind of close up the evening and look forward to seeing you all outside in a second. Thank you for hosting us.
And thank you for the hand, but can we be corny and give them a hand too?
Yeah.
Thank you, all of you.
Well, thank you. We have one more piece of business and an invitation to wrap up. So we're going to stick around. There's going to be refreshments, and our clinical team is going to be sticking around so you can ask them questions. Please bring your questions to them. We have, Jordan, can I get that next slide? Okay, great. We mentioned the time trial. One aspect of the time trial is that if you're a participant in the time trial, you're going to be spending a lot of time at the Buck, because the idea is we're going to take a number of measurements over a 24-hour period. So you could find yourself here from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. That's a long time. What are you going to be doing? So we realized we needed to create a space for our trial participants. And we had the very, very good fortune, two of my favorite people, Andy and Sarah Barnes. Andy is a trustee of the Buck. I know Sarah from the Marin Community Foundation. We had a wonderful conversation around, hey, what do you think of creating a lounge here at the Buck? And we need to do it fairly quickly, because as Brianna said, things are happening fast. And so after this and during the reception, I invite you just to walk around the corner, just on the other side of this wall, and check out our new lounge area called the Andy and Sarah Barnes Clinical Research Lounge. So first of all, thank you, Andy and Sarah. There'll be one piece we're going to ask you to use your imagination because we started this in January, beginning of January. In 30 days, we built the lounge, less than 30 days, and no thanks. Our facilities team has been amazing. We were able to do some incredible things to get it built. We were also blessed because Andy and Sarah brought to the table their wonderful daughter, Anna, and she is a miraculous interior designer. And so you're going to, that's fair, right? That's miraculous. When you walk into the lounge, check out the furniture that has been picked out. We're going to use your imagination because you're going to see them on a poster board because the furniture hasn't arrived yet. It was just ordered. There's going to be wonderful places for people who are going to be here all day to relax. There's going to be some reclining chairs, some regular chairs. We have some privacy pods, so you'll be able to go into your little kind of Doctor Who privacy pod and make your phone calls and hang out. I think it's a really special place, and it's right in proximity next to our clinic, and we couldn't have done it without you, so thank you again. So please go check that out. I want to say again thank you to some of our key donors, Dr. Johnson, who is here. Where's Jim was there. He might have stepped out for a sec. Bill Poland, thank you so much for your amazing vision from the very beginning. We had a named clinical center before we had a clinical program, right? And so it was thanks to Bill, his initial vision to really set us on this track. So thank you again to everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Celebrate with us, and please ask questions, and thank you for coming.